Maybe guys, one of the most distinctive things about Ichigo Kurosaki as a protagonist and as entity that contains multiple powers within him is the various forms he has taken throughout the story. And these forms, guys, represents the manifestation of his powers, whether individually or combined. All of this is a part of a complex structure that showcases Kubo's creativity in designing Ichigo's abilities. However, guys, in this video, I want to talk about the Hollow Ichigo that appeared during his battle with Ichigo from a new perspective, based on one of Kubo's previous statements. Because I consider guys this form to be one of Ichigo's most powerful states, and it could be seen as the true manifestation of Ichigo's Shinigami powers fused with his hollow side. Especially considering that Ichigo never used this form again. He wasn't even aware he used it until the Factions Zangetsu revealed Hollow Ichigo in that form and showed Ichigo what a proper hollow manifestation or transformation should actually look like, and what would have happened if Ichigo had been using hollowfication correctly. As White Sensei Zangetsu said, Ichigo's fear was the mere reason why he was never able to transform properly. That's why guys, the conversation in those scenes carried a deep meaning, not just for what we saw before, but also from the upcoming developments Ichigo would go through after discovering the truth about his powers and how they work. That's why guys, let's dive once again into this form and explore how Ichigo could have had a powerful, controlled transformation. And to begin with guys, the reason why I wanted to talk about this topic again came from the idea, what if Ichigo was able to use each of his powers separately? That is, what if he could activate his Fullbring power on its own, his Quincy power on its own, and his Shinigami power separately as well. Of course, in Ichigo's case, we cannot separate his hollow powers from his Shinigami powers, because they are one from the very beginning. The hollow side fused with his Shinigami powers from the start, even before he was born, which eventually formed his Zanpakuto. This is different from his Quincy power, which had its own independent form from the beginning, represented by the Old Man Zangetsu, who carried all of the Quincy traits. Meanwhile, White is, as we said, is the fusion of Ichigo's Shinigami power and hollow powers. And honestly guys, if Ichigo had known about his powers from the beginning, he would have been able to control them much more efficiently, whether using them all together or separately. Because guys, if you go back to the beginning of the story, the training Ichigo went through for his powers wasn't done properly. At first, Orohara Kisuke awakened Ichigo's Shinigami power without using a real Asauchi from Nimaya. Ichigo simply had White acting as his Asauchi and Vassal for his Shinigami powers, while the Old Man Zangetsu took the role of his Zanpakuto and spiritual power. So most of his training after that was based on the idea that the Old Man Zangetsu was his Shinigami power, and that the better his connection with him, the stronger he would become as a Shinigami. In the battle between Zaraki and Ichigo, it is true that the Old Man Zangetsu brought out White to train Ichigo in Shikai, but in the end, Ichigo never saw White as his true Zanpakuto, whom he needed to understand and connect with. Because guys, from the very first meeting with White, Ichigo saw him as a threat, as an invader in his world, someone he needed to get rid of. He believed that as long as he relied on the Old Man Zangetsu and connected with him, he would be able to fight in Shikai better. That's why Ichigo's Shinigami powers never truly developed the way they were meant to be. In fact, whenever Ichigo entered serious battles, it often put the Old Man Zangetsu in a situation where he had to rely on the hollow powers to help Ichigo to defeat his enemies. And this is what caused Hollow White to gradually emerge within Ichigo's inner world and try to take control. And as we said, the fact that Ichigo saw White as just an invader laid him down the wrong path in how he dealt with him, especially during the Hollow Control training with the Visards. The entire training was based on a flawed assumptions, mainly that the Visards thought Ichigo was just like them, which is completely incorrect. There is a huge difference between Ichigo and the Visards, because the Visards' hollow powers are not part of their core being. They were originally Shinigamis, had their own Zanpakutos, and only later experienced hollowfication due to Aizen. Meanwhile, Ichigo's hollow side was merged with his Shinigami powers from the start, from the very beginning. and the Visards aimed to control their hollows by forming masks on their faces, allowing them to access hollow power. But in reality, Ichigo was supposed to learn how to train with his Zanpakuto, which was fused with his hollow powers from the start, and that was the real difference. So even though Ichigo trained with the Visard and managed to wear a hollow mask, in truth Ichigo never truly transformed into a hollow correctly. Because as I said, and as Fake Tensa Zangetsu clarified, Ichigo was afraid of the hollow taking over. That's why he tried to suppress it, by relying only on the old man Zangetsu. And I say guys that Ichigo should have trained with White from the very beginning, knowing that he was his true Zanpakuto, so that he could learn how to fully use his powers. Because the only time Ichigo fully used White's powers, as in a complete transformation, he wasn't even conscious of himself. And I'm talking here about Ichigo's transformation during the fight with Ilikura. Kubo confirmed that this form was the true and proper hollow transformation of Ichigo. The full mask, the horns, and even his body structure changed into something resembling a Vasto Lord in shape. I'm just speaking about the shape. And also resembling a resurrection, but while still wielding a Shinigami Zanpakuto. That's why I say guys, Ichigo's full Shinigami powers can only truly manifest when both the mask and the horns appear together. Meaning guys, if Ichigo were ever able to fully control all of his powers to the point where he could separate them and use them individually as well, then he would be capable of appearing in the same form White took, with the long hair and the long horns. That's why guys, when Ichigo split his powers into two blades, a long one representing his Shinigami powers and a shortened one representing his Quincy power, if he had truly gained control over his hollow powers, he would have been able to awaken its full strength without even needing the Quincy blade, and he would have wearing the mask with the horns once again. And of course guys, during the Horn of Salvation form, he achieved something even greater. With the help of the old man Zangetsu, he managed to merge Quincy powers with White's power, which resulted in a single horn fused with his Quincy powers, similar to what happened in the Dangai. But based on Ichigo's own words, it still seems that relying entirely on White's powers is difficult for him. That's why he still needs both of his powers to find balance. That's why guys, I wish Ichigo had spent more time with White after discovering his true powers and understanding White's real identity. And I believe guys that if Ichigo had given more time to White and the two had come to fully understand each other, we might have actually seen a version of Hollow Ichigo in full transformation again, but this time with Ichigo fully in control, while still maintaining White's aggressive and merciless fighting style. And actually Kubo tried to give us a glimpse of that with the Horn of Salvation form, but to me, that version combines both Ichigo's Shinigami power and Quincy powers. That's why guys, I say, seeing Ichigo once again in that form he used against Ilikura is not impossible, as long as Ichigo learns how to hollowfy properly, without needing the help of the old man Zangetsu. In the end guys, what do you think about that form? Can we see it again? Tell me guys your opinions in the comments, and see you in my next video.